today's video. So I'm kind of throwing together like a typical all-motor single cam build. I'm doing just factory rods and P29 high compression pistons. But to handle higher revs and a little bit extra power to be making, I'm going to be swapping out the factory connected rod hardware for ARP, because once you get a little bit higher in the revs, you're revving past what the engine was designed to do, and you might be making a little bit more power, this and that. The factory hardware, it can actually stretch, and the cap and rod can actually start to separate a little bit. And once that happens, your clearances open up. You might lose oil pressure, and that can lead towards bearing failure, things like that. So stronger hardware is just a plus. They're cheap. I think the ARP kit was like $50 on Amazon. But yeah, today I'm just going to be showing you how I like to swap it out. It might not necessarily be like the 100% legit way to do it. It's just how I do it, and I've had good luck with it in the past. So let's get into it. So I had already started putting together the bottom end, but there's no problem. I'm going to go ahead and disassemble it to separate the rods. What I like to do is just back off the nuts and give it a couple taps. And that'll start to separate the rod and cap. Cap should come off fairly easily. We can go ahead and just pull the cap off. And then from here, just go ahead and push the piston down and through and catch it out the bottom. So I figured it'd just be easy to show you this way. I had an extra rod. They're really easy to get out. I already got one out on this one. If you care about the factory hardware, of course, you're going to want to do it a different way, but this is getting chunked in the trash. And yes, I'm using a freaking carpenter hammer to hammer it out. I wish I had something better, but that's what I had laying around. But look how easy it is. This one's pressing all the way. Just give it a couple whacks. Probably be better for a little vise too. But yeah, it comes out really easily. And it's the same way to put it in. You can put on a vise, press it in. They're shaped in a way to where they only go in one way. So they're kind of, the factory stuff is like an oval. And obviously the oval sits in here to lock the head of it in place so it doesn't spin. And the ARP stuff I was looking at, it's not so symmetrical on the bottom. I could probably open the package and get a better look. But you can tell that it's one side is supposed to go towards the inside of the cap to help lock that in place. So yeah, I'm just going to put these in and start them by hand and torque them down out of the engine and then put them in and torque it down again. So it's pretty self-explanatory, but some people like the detail on like how to install, stuff that isn't 100% clear. So basically the ARPs aren't symmetrical like the factory stuff. Like I was saying, one side is rounded and one side is flat. The rounded side is going to face in towards the rod. And then the flat side is basically, it just matches up to the shape of the outside of the rod itself. Whereas the factory stuff is just kind of oval. It's kind of symmetrical. The factory, you can go either way, but on the ARP stuff, it is directional. And that's one way to tell also if you have legitimate ARP hardware, because I actually got scammed into getting some fake stuff. It's always stamped ARP. Right there. You see that? ARP. Legitimate ARP hardware is usually stamped. So look out for that and make sure you don't get scammed out of fake stuff. So to get the studs seated, you honestly don't even need them on a vise or anything. It's really easy. You press them in, like I said, and you can literally tighten them by hand to make them seat all the way, because they'll stop at that point and the rest of the way needs to be ran in. Like I said, they stop at this point. They do stick out at the top. That allows you to get the nuts at least started. And then from here, you can literally just hand tighten the studs all the way to seat. And I'm going to see if this has enough torque to do it. I'm sure it will. Let's see if we can watch those studs sink down. That's good. Here's the other one. Ooh, that one needed a little bit more ugga-duggas. Seems to be good. So I'm going to go ahead and take the cap or the nuts back off, because from here, this is where it gets interesting. So the factory torque specs on the rods are something like 22 foot-pounds. And with ARP stuff, I believe you can go to like 40. Sometimes they put the instructions on here. No, I don't see any. But yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, God dang it. Yeah, I was hoping there was some instruction, but so from what I've seen, people can go up to 40 foot-pounds. But basically, what happens is when you're doing more torque than what the factory, intended to be put on these rods, you can elongate the hole, the big end of the connecting rod. Whenever you clamp this down more, you can start to kind of warp the circular opening, if that makes any sense. It kind of turns into an oval, is basically what I'm trying to say. Whenever you go from like 20 foot-pounds of torque up to 40, you can start to change the dimension of the opening. So what I like to do is kind of like the DIY ghetto way to do it, I guess, is I install the bearing, I put it on the journal, and I torque it to whatever foot-pound I'm going to use, like, for example, 40 foot-pounds. I'll probably honestly only do 30. Factory's 22. I'll probably just go to 30 and leave it. It's not some powerhouse single cam motor. It's probably going to have like 160 horsepower if I'm lucky. So I torque it to spec with the bearings installed, and I feel the drag on the journal. I'll move it and see if I can feel any drag, because if it's misshapen in any way, it'll catch the journal and it won't rotate freely. So if it does, I take it back off and I hone the opening with a small, it's like 1.5 to 2.5 inch. It's like a tiny little honer. It's probably designed for the pistons inside of brake calipers. But I use that to hone the inside very slowly, a little bit at a time, until I feel no drag on the journal, until it spins freely, nice and smooth, like how it did with the factory studs and the factory 22 foot-pounds of torque. So let's get some bearings on this thing. Let's get it on the connecting rod. Let's torque it to 30 foot-pounds and see how it feels. If it feels fine, I might not even have to do that, but you got to check one by one. Make sure they all feel fine, no drag, no binding, because like I said, you can run into warpage if you torque down on those studs too tight. And okay, so I think in the beginning I said I know this isn't like the 100% legitimate way to do it. The correct way to do it is just to hand it all off to a machine shop, because they basically have like this miniature, it looks like a boring bar almost. They actually stick the big end of the rod in this machine, and they basically open it up, and they have dial indicator, and they measure the tolerances and the clearances, and they get really, really precise with it. This is just DIY, do it in your garage with no special tools type stuff. But yeah, if you've got something serious like a big powerhouse motor, something that's maybe more valuable than an old 90s Honda shitbox, you might actually want to just hand us off to the machine shop, to be honest. Okay, so this is how I decided to do the trial and error, test fitting, making sure there's no drag or anything like I was saying. I just installed it on the bottom side because it still gives me, I can still rotate it and feel the drag if it does have any. And I can rotate the crank and get a good idea on all locations of the journal. This is, make sure, I'm going to torque it to the factory 22 foot-pounds. Should be just about there. Yeah, so it is torqued to factory spec, and of course, there's no drag. It's nice and smooth around the entire section of the journal, 360 degrees. Now what we can do is go ahead and torque it to the 30 foot-pounds, or whatever case, every case can be different. That's all I'm going to run. I'm going to go 30 foot-pounds. And like I said, it might not even need to be honed. But if, because it's not a big jump from 22 foot-pounds to 30 foot-pounds. So I might not even get any warpage in that big end of the rod. But if I do, like I said, I'm gonna have to hone it. That wasn't even a quarter more of a rotation. It was like an eighth of a rotation to get that 30 foot-pounds. Not a big difference. Let's get the other side. Okay, and one more thing, if you are doing this, like, make sure you're not using the set of bearings you're going to be using in the end result. Because if it does have drag and warpage, you can damage the bearing whenever you're testing for clearance like this. So make sure you're using like an extra set or just a set that you're not going to use when you're in your final assembly, pretty much. Yeah, that's just barely more to get that 30 foot-pounds. I doubt it's going to have any drag. It honestly feels exactly the same. Which is good. I'm not complaining, I'm just saying. Oop, that's getting a little awkward. The rod was kind of hanging up in the underside of the block. So yeah, going from 22 foot-pounds to 30, it feels exactly the same. It's not getting hung up. I highly doubt it got any warpage. But if you do step it up to like 40 or more, you can start to kind of misshape the opening of the rod. And if that does happen, this is the tool that I was going to use to reshape the big end. It's spring loaded and it goes inside the rod. You just use a drill, oil it up, get some lube, and just spin it in there and use this to open up and give yourself a little bit more clearance to bring back the shape of that big end. So yeah, just to kind of, this is a rod out of, I think a 5.3, like an LS based engine. And just to kind of show you what I'm talking about, you would install the rods, of course, take the bearings out, just have the bare rod in there, torque it to the spec you're going to run in the end, like 40, 50, or who knows, whatever. And you would just install the hone, put it on drill, and literally hone it out and just barely get yourself some more clearance to where it's not hanging up on the journal. So it's easy as that. So from here on out, I'm just going to go one by one, check all the rods, and it's a good idea if you do have an issue, not even if you have an issue, but if you know if one rod feels good on a specific journal, number it, mark it, be like, this is dedicated, this is rod 1 for cylinder 1, rod 2 for cylinder 2, 3, like, get them matched up, because it can be so close that one might be okay in one journal, but then it won't be okay on another. Did I say that right? Will be okay on one and won't be on another, vice versa. So yeah, it's just good practice. Just number your stuff and get them on the journal that you know for sure is good. Yeah, I mean, the rest is pretty much what before. I don't think I'll record the rest. I'm just going to go through one by one and get all these ARP studs installed. The pistons, the rods back in the block, and start to make some progress on this all-motor D16. But if you like this video, like, subscribe. See you next one. Thanks for watching. Later.